This is another Reddit reading posted by user atobitt on subreddit Superstonk. House of Cards Part 3. Prerequisite DD. Citadel has no close. The Everything Short. The House of Cards Part 1 and the House of Cards Part 2. Continuing from House of Cards Part 2. Blimey. If you watched the AMA with Wes Christian, he talks about the number of occurrences where the actual short interest is severely understated based on the data his firm obtained for legal proceedings. According to his numbers, in most cases the short interest is 50 to 150% more than what is reported by the SEC. The objective isn't to address the issue, it's to keep the issue hidden. Firms that underreport their short interest are gaming the system by taking advantage of how the short interest calculation is done. When the SEC relies on reports that broker-dealers provide, and FINRA takes years to reveal the lies within those reports, the broker-dealer can lie without immediately facing the consequences. It allows these firms to operate in a high-risk environment without exposing just how big their risk appetite is. Another example that Wes mentioned was Merrill Lynch. Merrill was fined $415 million, violation 3, in 2016 for using securities held in their customers' accounts to cover their own trades. Check out this screenshot I took from that case. Willfully violated Section 15C3 and Rule 15C3-3. Engaged in a series of complex trades that allowed it to use customer cash to finance firm inventory and allowed certain of its clearing banks to hold liens on customer securities. Remember when we mentioned SEA 15C3-3 in the case with Apex? They were asking customers to book short positions to either a cash account or a short margin account. SEA 15C3-3 protects those customers from allowing brokers to lend out the securities within their cash accounts. Well, Merrill Lynch knocked that one right out of the fucking park. Merrill Lynch improperly reduced by billions of dollars the amount it was required to deposit in its customer reserve account. Respondent used these trades to remove up to $5 billion of customer cash week over week from its customer reserve account. Merrill Lynch then used these funds to finance its business activities. Had Merrill Lynch failed when the trades were in use, its customers would have been exposed to a shortfall of customer cash in the customer reserve account. Merrill Lynch made it seem like the required deposit in their customer reserve account was much lower than it truly was. They wouldn't have been able to use that cash if it reduced the amount below the minimum capital requirement. So they found a way to fudge the numbers. In doing so, they managed to prevent a code red while reaping the benefits of a high-risk opportunity. Should Merrill have filed bankruptcy during that time, those customers would have been completely blindsided. In the case of short selling, the true exposure of short interest is unknown. And I'm not just talking about the short sell indicator. When a firm fails to deliver securities that were sold short, there's a pretty good indication that they've exposed themselves to a bit of a problem. Now imagine a case where the FTDs start piling up and they still continue to short sell that same security. Think I'm joking? Check out the Royal Bank of Canada. Failing to properly close out a fail-to-deliver position in 7 sampled securities. Increasing its short position when a fail-to-deliver position had not been properly closed out without demonstrating that it made arrangements for pre-borrowing in the following equity securities. Failed to assure that numerous fail-to-deliver positions were closed out on a timely basis. Again, I was pretty shocked at that one. However, nothing rang the bell quite like this one from Goldman Sachs. Violated Rule 204TA of Regulation Show by failing on approximately 68 occasions to timely close out fail-to-deliver positions in certain equity securities. December 9th, 2008 through January 22nd, 2009. Violated Rule 204TB of Regulation Show on approximately 45 occasions by accepting certain customer short sell orders in equity securities for which it had an open fail-to-deliver position while GSEC and the customer were in the penalty box. as the customer had not first borrowed such securities or entered into a bona fide arrangement to borrow the securities, December 9th, 2008 through January 22nd, 2009. Goldman had 68 occasions in 4 months where they didn't close a failure to deliver. In 45 occasions, they continued to accept customer short sale orders in securities which it had an active failure to deliver. When a firm is really starting to sweat, they pull certain tricks out of their ass to quell the situation. Again, this is nothing but smoke and mirrors because that's all they can really do. Just as Merrill Lynch artificially lowered their customer reserve deposit, other firms make it look like they cover their short positions. One of the ways they do this is by short selling a shitload of shares right before a buy-in. Since we're talking about Goldman Sachs, this seems like a great time to showcase their experience with this. Without admitting or denying the findings, the firm consented to the sanctions and to the entry of findings that it did not, as a general practice, allocate responsibility for closing out failed-to-deliver positions to its broker-dealer clients under Regulation Show Rules 203B, 3, 6, and 204T-D or 204D. Clients of the firm had, on a number of occasions, short-sold a security on the same day that they were notified that they were being bought in by the firm in that same security, typically in amounts equal to or greater than their attributed portion of the number of shares purchased by the firm in an effort to meet its closeout obligations. I promise it really is as dumb as it sounds. So the perception here is when Goldman's client has a FTD and they find out a buy-in is coming, the required buy-in would obviously be too extreme for the client to handle. So they begin to buy those shares while simultaneously shorting at least the same amount they were required to purchase. Have you ever failed to repay a loan so you went to another bank and got a loan to cover the first one? Well, that's exactly what this is. I know what you're probably thinking. Didn't that just kick the can down the road? The answer is yes. It didn't actually solve anything. There's still one more citation that Goldman received, which truly represents the pinnacle of no shits given. After I cover this, I don't know how anyone could argue the systematic risks that exist within the securities lending business. Check it out. Public administrative and cease and desist proceedings be, and hereby are, instituted pursuant to sections 15B and 21C of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 against Goldman Sachs & Co. Between November 2008 and mid-2013, in providing and documenting locates to enable its customers to execute short sales, between November 2008 and mid-2013, to comply with Reg Show, Goldman employed a system where the vast majority of customer short sale locate requests were handled by an automated model that would either grant in whole or in part or fill, deny or route or pend the requests for further review to the demand team, a group of 10 to 12 individuals who worked on Goldman Securities lending. The number of locate requests that pended to the demand team grew significantly, reaching more than 20,000 locate requests per day at its peak. The volume of locate requests became far more than the demand team could manually handle on a request-by-request basis. Thus, instead of manually identifying an alternative source of securities to satisfy these pending requests, the demand team processed approximately 98% of the pending requests by relying on a function of Goldman's order management system referred to as Fill from Auto Locate, which was activated by the F3 key. This function enabled the demand team to cause Goldman's automated model to fill locate requests based on the amount of inventory that... 5 years, Goldman relied on a team of 10 to 12 individuals to locate shares to be used by its clients for short selling. This group was known as the demand team. Naturally, as the number of requests coming in the door started to increase, it became difficult for the team to properly document all of them. Volume peaked at 20,000 requests per day, but the number of individuals that handled this job stayed the same. Obviously, this became too much for them to handle, so they opted out of the manual process and found another solution, the F3. Yes, the F3 key. This button activated an autofill system which completed 98% of Goldman's orders to locate shares. Existed at the start of the day, i.e., start of the day inventory level before any locates were granted, even though Goldman's automated model had already treated the start of day inventory as depleted. Instead, they relied on their general belief that Goldman's automated model was conservative and that the provision of additional locates would not result in failures to deliver the securities if and when due for settlement. In both cases, the locate log simply contained the term auto-locate to refer to the start of day inventory utilized by Goldman's automated model as the source of securities supporting the locate. As a result of the conduct described above, Goldman willfully violated Section 17A of the Exchange Act and Rules 203b1 and 203b13 of Regulations Show promulgated under the Exchange Act. The problem with Goldman's autofill system was that it used the number of shares available to borrow at the beginning of the day, which had already been accounted for. After using the auto-locate feature, the demand team didn't even verify the accuracy of the autofill feature for document which method was used to locate the shares for each order. And this happened for 5 years. This goes to show how dedicated firms like Goldman Sachs truly are to the smallest of details. You know? Great fucking work, guys. By the way, I have to show one of Goldman's short sell indicator violations. It's too good to pass up. For short interest reporting cycles for about 4 years, submitted reports that did not include short interest positions of over 380 million shares. At some point, you just have to laugh at these ass clowns. I mean, seriously. One violation for a 4-year period involving over 380 million short interest positions. They have plenty of other short interest violations. I just laughed at how the magnitude of this one was summarized by FINRA within 10 lines in roughly 4 minutes. Whoever wrote that one must have been late for lunch. The last thing I'd like to note here is the way in which short sellers use options to cover their positions. Wes gave a great overview of this in the AMA. Basically, one group will buy puts and another group buys calls. This creates a synthetic share that is only provided if the option is activated. Regardless, short sellers will use that synthetic share to cover their short position, and the regulators actually accept it. However, as Wes points out, most of those options expire without being activated, which means the share is never delivered. This expiration can be set months down the road and allows the short seller to keep kicking the can. I doubt I need to say this, but we all remember the wild options activity that was happening shortly after GameStop spiked in January. User HeyIt'sPixel was one of the first to point this out. While a lot of that activity was on the retail front, I suspect a lot of it was done by short sellers to cover those positions. Hedgies are fucked. I'm officially 20 plus pages deep and there's still so much I'd like to say. It's best saved for another time in another post, I suppose. So I guess I'll wrap all of this up with some of the best news I can possibly provide. It all started with a 73-page PDF that was published in 2005 by a silverback named John D. Finnerty. John was a professor of finance at Fordham University when he published Short Selling, Death Spiral Convertibles, and the Profitability of Stock Manipulation. The document is loaded with shit that's incredibly relevant today, especially when it comes to naked short selling. He dives into the exact formula that short sellers use, which is far beyond what my wrinkled brain can interpret alone. However, when firms are naked shorting a company with the goal of bankrupting them, they leave footprints which are only explained by this event. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak. To zero would involve naked shorting more shares than the firm has outstanding because the manipulator cannot drive the share price close to zero unless he can naked short an extraordinary number of shares. This form of manipulation would result in a precipitous drop in the firm's share price to well below its intrinsic value. Unusually heavy trading volume and unusually large and persistent fails to deliver at the NSC. Any of this sound familiar? The manipulator cannot drive the share price close to zero unless he can naked short an extraordinary number of shares. This form of manipulation would result in unusually heavy trading volume and unusually large and persistent fails to deliver at the NSCC. Anyone else remember the volume in GME during the run-up in January? The total volume traded between 131 and 25 was 1.5 billion shares, or an average daily trade volume of 88 million shares. On January 22nd, the volume reached 197 million. That's roughly 3 times the number of shares that exist. If this doesn't sound like unusual volume, then I'm not sure what is. Furthermore, the FTD report on GameStop was through the roof during this time. Eventually, the firm will exhaust its liquidity and have to file for bankruptcy. The manipulator will be relieved of its obligation to cover its short position if the firm's shares are canceled in bankruptcy. This scenario leads to a zero cost of covering the short positions. Notice the statement where the manipulator will be relieved of its obligation to cover if the firm's shares are canceled in bankruptcy. Did you happen to see footnotes 65 and 66 in the first screenshot of his PDF? It references a company that he used for his analysis. Charter Communications had short interest of 88,520,000 shares in January 2005, but Charter reported having outstanding shares minus shares held by insiders of only 36,600,000 shares. So Charter Communications had a whopping 241.8% short float in 2005. The only way the manipulator could have escaped this was by bankrupting the company and relieving the obligation to repurchase those shares. Guess what happened to Charter? They filed for bankruptcy in 2009. However, unlike John's example, where naked short sellers were driving down the price without opposition, GameStop had extremely high demand from retail investors to counter this activity. As I have discussed with Dr. T and Carl Hagberg, the run-up in volume during January and February was largely conducted by naked short sellers in an attempt to suppress the share price. As I have shown in the example with Goldman Sachs, firms will short sell during a buy-in for the same exact reason: to stabilize the price. You must stabilize supply and demand. You know what Charter didn't have? An army of apes to hold the stonk. Diamond fucking hands.